And welcome back to Luminary Leaders Live. My name is Shelly Harrison, and I'm so glad that you're here today. We are streaming. I heard LinkedIn was having a problem with streaming, so I'm hoping that we're streaming there because we have an amazing guest today, and you'll meet him in just a moment. Again, I'm Shelly Harrison. I'm your host here on Luminary Leaders Live, and I hope you like the light in the back. I know my studio looks a little bit different, but I added a little luminary light. So I'm just testing this to see how that goes. But at any rate, I want to welcome all of our followers, subscribers, watchers. We're streaming on multiple channels, and I have an amazing guest today. You'll just be excited to see who he is. His name is Travis Chappell, and he is the CEO and founder of Guestio. We're going to get into a story. We're going to talk about what he does, and you're going to learn some things today too. So I want to bring on Travis. Hi, Travis.
Hey, Shelly, how are you?
Doing good, doing good. And you know what? I just want to say I'm so happy to meet you because I've watched a lot of your shows, followed some of them, watched, the people that you have on your shows. And you are such a very eloquent interviewer.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And you have the most, very calm and easygoing. And I'm like, you know what? I need to learn some things from Travis.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the show, Shelly. And I'm happy to share anything that I possibly can. Hopefully something's helpful.
Well, I'm sure that you will. Definitely you will. Let's kind of go back to, we talked a little bit in the studio in terms of your story, and I'm sure you've shared it multiple times. Our audience doesn't necessarily, know your whole story. Some of them probably do, but I would love for you to take us back to Lancaster and kind of where it all started and how you discovered what your, just what you wanted to do in the world.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the bird's eye view. So yeah, I grew up in a city called Lancaster, which most people don't know where it is. Shelly and I had a little moment before because she's one of the few who did know where it is. But it's Southern California, which it's northern LA County. It's basically the furthest north you could possibly be in LA. So technically I'm from LA, which is what I tell people. But then people that are from LA are like, oh, cool, where at? And I'm like, Lancaster. And they're like, that's not LA. I'm like, okay, look, I know it's not the greatest, but also that's why I don't live there anymore. But coincidentally, I grew up in Southern California in a very strict religious bubble. It was a independent fundamental Baptist church, and it was in Lancaster, still is. And it was kind of a mega church campus in that world. So like 6,000-7,000 members, maybe something like that. K through 12 school, a full ministerial college on the campus. And I went from kindergarten all the way through senior year of college at that school, church, college campus. And that was pretty much everything I knew about life was all from that one place. So when I came out of that, I figured out pretty quickly after I graduated with a degree in Bible and church ministries, I thought I was going to be a youth pastor. I figured out really quickly I didn't really want to be in ministry. And that kind of like screwed up all of my plans because I thought that's what I was going to do from the time that I committed to doing it when I was 12. So there was never any other thoughts about what I wanted to do with my life at that point. It was that or nothing, And so when I figured out it wasn't going to be that, I was like, well, nothing isn't really an option. So let's see what I can do here. And so I did door-to-door sales. Was what I decided to do right out of college, just because I did door-to-door in college, paid the bills, made extra money and stuff like that. And I figured, I figured at that time, it was like best case scenario, what happens here? Like what type of a job, quote unquote job, am I going to get? I have an unaccredited Bible degree. Like an accredited Bible degree doesn't do much for you, let alone an unaccredited one. It's basically as useless as the paper it's printed on. And so I was kind of lost, didn't know what to do. And I figured best case scenario here, I go get like what, a $30,000, $35,000 a year job in an office somewhere. Like that sounds like not my cup of tea. You know what I mean? Like listening to somebody bark orders at me that I don't respect and like being in an office and people tell me what to do all the time just didn't seem to work for me. And so I did 100% commission door-to-door sales because that's just what made more sense to me at the time. And I had some,
experience. Brutal.
Yes and no. So yes, in the sense that like after doing it for a while, it got to me and I just kind of got sick of doing it, to be honest. I did it for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
So eventually I just, like I said, just lost touch with the desire to prove that I could do it.
Mhm.
Really weird. Cause like when I stopped doing door to door, I was making more money than I ever had in terms of like commission per deal.
Yeah.
Um, but it was just no longer motivating to me. So I ended up in the podcasting space. But there was a lot of really great things about it too, though. Like first of all, the fact that I could make six figures right out of college with an unaccredited Bible degree was not something that many other opportunities would have offered me
Yeah.
as a 21-year-old trying to figure out life. Especially not because like when there's typically two ways people knock. Usually it's like summer programs, and this is a lot of what Utah is built on, is the back of door to door summer program guys. And
Yeah.
they just work from May to September, and they work 10-12 hours a day, and they crush
Mm.
doors, and they make six figures in 4 months, and then they bounce and go back
Gosh.
to school or whatever. But for us, we were a year-round operation, and so we didn't knock 10-12 hours a day, even though we could have, you wanted to.
Mm.
We knocked 4 or 5 hours a day. So I made six figures at 21, working 20 to 25 hours a week,
Wow.
and without any like special skills or degree or certification or any of those things. So it was
Yeah.
definitely one of those situations where it was like, yeah, doing 100% commission door to door sales doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Doesn't sound like it's super ideal. But if you can make it happen, if you can swing it, it's actually a pretty sweet setup. You know what I mean? Where I had decent amount of time freedom. They couldn't
Mhm.
make me knock on doors. I was an independent contractor. I worked when I wanted to. However, if you don't knock on doors, you don't make any money. So you're going to want to work every day if you want to make
Oh,
some decent
of
money
course.
doing it. And so yeah, that was what I kind of cut my teeth doing, was door to door
Mm.
sales. And then I kind of got sick of it, and was just at a point in my life where it was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm
Mhm.
good at this door to door thing, but I don't really like it, and I don't want to do it long term. And then this other thing that I have a degree in, I don't really like that and don't want to do that long term. So like, what do I do? And at this point, I'm 22. I'm married. I
Still
have
pretty
a
young. Yeah.
mortgage.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Married and
Yeah.
that age. Yeah.
Yeah. So like there was, not a lot of options in terms of like, oh, let me go couch surf or like go to Europe for 3 months and live off of nothing. It was like, I have a wife at home to provide for. I have a mortgage to pay. I have regular bills. Like it was figure it out or bust. You know what I mean? So I dove headfirst for the first time in my life into self-education. All education up to that point, for the most part, had been just like whatever the school made me read or whatever. And even then, it was mostly like I would read the back cover of the book and write the book report based off of the back cover. You know what I mean? Um,
Gosh.
so I started getting into reading and audiobooks, and then someone turned me on to podcasts, and I just really fell in love with the medium. I really enjoyed listening from a listener perspective. I enjoyed the fact that I could just like I could learn passively, meaning that I
Mhm.
like the conversation was entertaining enough still, but I could learn. But the people who were having the conversation were so far ahead of me in their careers that it was
Mhm.
still educational in that perspective. But I
Mhm.
could be walking around the house, I could be, mowing the lawn, or I could be at the gym, or I could be driving my car, and it was just always on in the background, and I could learn stuff like just almost subconsciously as you move throughout your day. Whereas,
That's
book
true.
or an audiobook, you got to
Yeah.
like pay attention. You feel bad if you miss a part of the book, and it's like, oh, I got to go back and re-listen to that chapter because I wasn't paying attention. It's like, well, if you miss 10 minutes of a podcast, you miss 10 minutes of a podcast, and you just keep
Yeah.
listening.
But
You
you
know what I mean?
just go
So
back. You can always go back too, though.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that part of podcasting. And then after listening to enough, I was just like, hey, maybe I should start one of these.
So you started with your own podcast, and then it kind of just developed from there.
Yeah.
And here you are, you're the CEO of Guestio. You've had some amazing guests on your shows. And I know I've been at this for about 4 years, and we started as a podcast, and we were
Okay.
editing all of our shows, and I thought, no, 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 I don't want to be doing that. I just want to bring real people on my show, get out there and just push it out, and bring on people that have really interesting stories. And I know that, like for you with Guestio, you've got quite a system. So let's talk about that, because there was a term that I found, and it was through your website, interview marketing. I love
Mm,
that term because I think that really kind of says everything. And it was actually one of the folks on your team, Eric, who I watched his podcast, and he was talking about, should people charge for, being a guest on a show? And I
mm.
thought, oh, that's got to be interesting. So I watched it. And then when I saw interview marketing, let's talk about that, because that is kind of an interesting area and how it relates to your company, Guestio.
Yeah, sure. It kind of just was something we're trying to figure out a way to explain what we did for people
Yeah.
without just saying like, oh, we help people start podcasts or we get people booked on podcasts. It's like, okay, yeah, but to what end? Right. So
Mm,
that's kind of where
yeah.
interview marketing came from, because it was like, well, it's not just podcast guesting. It's also hosting your own podcast, but it's not just podcast hosting. It's also being a guest on podcasts. It's like, well, both of those things involve interviews. So that's why we kind of dubbed it as like, hey, this is interview marketing.
Yeah.
And so when we were doing consulting and stuff before we started Guestio, it was basically, we would help business owners and entrepreneurs set up podcasts in a way that would be conducive for their network growth,
Hmm.
shaking more hands, kissing more babies type of a thing,
Yeah.
but also using it as a way to hunt down and target their ideal client lists, and get their foot in the door for people that are really difficult to get your foot in the door with, because we found it to be a much more effective tool than any sort of like outbound marketing or, um, you know, cold messaging or whatever everybody else is using.
Yeah.
So we use it as a way to be like, hey, interview your ideal clients. And eventually, if you do a good job and they get to know you and you build rapport in a conversation and they understand that you solve a problem that they're experiencing, then it's probably going to lead to business. And it did for a lot of our clients. And so when we did the guesting side, it was kind of the same thing. We're just like, well, we're noticing just a lot of positive returns from me going on a bunch of podcasts, and it was like one of the
Yeah.
things that helped me grow my own show was going on a bunch of podcasts. And so, but I also noticed that it was helpful to both host a show and to be a guest on other shows,
Exactly.
yeah, very intentional network building practice. Helps you have real meaningful conversations with people that you already obviously have some sort of commonality or some shared interest with. So when you are able to have those types of conversations with that many people, some of them are going to stick a little bit better. Some of them are going to, fall by the wayside along the way, but that's all okay. And it's natural. It's part of like the making friends networking process, is that you're going to connect with a bunch of people, and then, not everybody's going to make it to the next stage, because not everybody should make it to the next stage, because we're all different people. And sometimes it's, you're going to find some people that you didn't really vibe with, some people that you did vibe with. And that's the nature of people and meeting more people. So it was a really effective tool for us. And so we just decided to start helping other people with it.
Yeah, and I'm very impressed with, the website. And I know I had a subscription and I have to go back and renew it. And I can't wait to do that, because I think, you've got quite a system going. And
Thank
I'm curious, how did you even come up with Guestio? How
you.
did that name come up?
I was scratching my own itch in a way. I was
Mhm.
trying to get better guests on my show. And the only tool that existed for you to be able to get in touch with people and pay for was Cameo. And so
Oh, yeah.
I was using Cameo, and it worked once or twice, but
Mhm.
it didn't work like 6 or 7 times. And what that meant was I would pay $200 or $300 for a Cameo,
Oh,
and
gosh.
in the message I would ask them to come on my show. And then, like I said, I did get a couple people, but also
Mhm.
I got several people that were like, no, but they sent the Cameo back, and so now I'm just out $300 to get
Mhm.
a personalized video of them rejecting me. You know what I mean? Essentially.
Oh,
So
gosh.
it was like, well, clearly
And
this
you
is not
said
what
once
this
or
tool is
twice.
meant for. Yeah, right, right. It was like, this is not what this tool is meant for. But if this tool did
Mhm.
exist, I would be a customer. And so,
Oh,
so decided to build it, and that's what eventually became Guestio.
yeah. Yeah, and, I like, for example, with LinkedIn, I don't know about you, that's my go-to place. And I've been able to reach out to people. In fact, you and I connected on LinkedIn, believe it or not. I don't know if you remember, because you
Oh yeah, yeah.
so many people. But that's how we connected. And that's one of the ways that I think, I enjoy, just going through LinkedIn, connecting with people and finding, I love people that have great stories. And I know with you, here you are living, like you've stated, living in a bubble. And here you are, you're this outgoing, you've got all these wonderful guests that you're interviewing. And I'm sure people want to know how, I've had a few people on my show that I think, wow, I'm really just impressed, and I feel good that, they were on the show. And I think it's great to have people that have a name or, some celebrity. And as long as they have a great story and they're friendly, right?
Mhm.
How
Yeah,
do
yeah.
you feel about that? I mean, if you're interviewing somebody and like you said earlier, vibing, it's important that you vibe with these people and,
Absolutely.
have that interaction that's going to be interesting to other people?
I basically adopted this concept really at the beginning of last year. What happened was the show was called Build Your Network for 5.5 years ish, like 800
Yes.
episodes of Build Your Network. It was very niche specific. It's obvious from the title name. You know what
Yeah,
you're coming
the
for.
network.
You know what you're staying for. Is like, I want to learn how to network better. Build your
Yeah.
network. You know what I mean? I just got sick, honestly, of the conversation just only about networking and stuff. And so the show kind of evolved on its own. And then at some point it was just like, well, now the content doesn't really match the show name, and then we're kind of getting this confusion there. And then anytime I would just accept interviews, because that's what I felt like I needed to do to talk about the topic, I wasn't interested in the conversation. And it came through in the way that I would prepare. It came through in the way that I'd ask questions, and the content just started not being as good. I didn't enjoy it as much. It started zapping energy from me instead of giving me energy. And so at the beginning of last year, I kind of when we rebranded the show from Build Your Network to Travis Makes Friends.
Yeah, I saw that. I love that. I love that.
Thank you.
That's so just cool.
Yeah, it felt more Travis to me.
Yeah,
it felt more
exactly.
like me.
You're branding yourself.
Yeah, it went from like kind of this like corporate idea of, and to be fair, the Build a Network thing needed to happen for a period of time. Like I needed to learn everything about it while I was super niche specific. And I think that it's easier if you're starting from nothing to start with a super niche audience and then go more broad rather than starting really broad. Because it's way more difficult to attract people into your world. But that aside, we rebranded Travis Makes Friends, and the main thing that I took away from that whole transition was basically I'm only going to talk to people that I'm interested in talking to at this point. Now, a lot of that coincides with size of influence. Because people who have gained a lot of influence are just intrinsically more interesting sometimes. Because it's like, how did you, where did you, why did you, you know what I mean? There's a lot of questions that come out from that. And it's obviously really effective for your own show growth,
right?
Is to get like, bigger name people who have audiences. Because like if nobody recognizes who Travis is, but they recognize Shaquille O'Neal, then they're probably going to stop and watch the video more. They're more likely to stop and watch the video because they see Shaq. And then it's just like, then they see my face and it's like, who's this guy? You know what I mean? But they know who Shaq is. So they're going to tune into that episode. So it obviously helps with show growth as well if you can get those bigger names on there. However, it's not my core metric anymore, because a lot of people, you'll use that as their core metric. Like you have to have a certain amount of audience or following or whatever.
Yeah.
Now it's just more, who am I interested in talking to? And it happens to be more people that have audiences, because like I said, they're a little bit more interesting in general, but also they're in your face. It's easier to find people with big audiences, right? Like it's more difficult to find somebody who's a savage who doesn't have a big audience, because like, how do you meet those people? It's more difficult to get introduced to those types of people. However, I have had quite a few of those people on my show in the last year and a half too, where you have no idea who they are and they should have a massive following, but they don't. But they're just really smart business people that are doing real legitimate business in the kind of entrepreneurial world, but because they're not influencers, you don't hear anything about them. And it's like, well, if I'm calling somebody to like ask them advice on something, it's probably going to be one of those guys. It's not going to be somebody with a massive audience, most of the time. Those skills don't always overlap. There's a lot of people that have big audiences that are subpar business people comparatively to some of the people that I know who don't have any audience at all. And that's obviously across the board in basically anything. There's a lot of people that are really good at what they do. They don't have an audience, either because they didn't try to build one, or because they're not, shocking enough, or didn't master the algorithms or whatever, so they don't get the attention that they deserve. But I also really enjoy those conversations. Like I said, it just became a metric of whether or not I'm interested in talking to somebody, rather than like, what are all the other metrics that I should be weighing this by. It was just more like, what's going to make me enjoy doing this again.
I totally agree. Now, that's a great way of looking at it. And Travis, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back, because I have a few more questions before the broadcast ends.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So we are back with Luminary Leaders Live and my special guest, Travis Chappell, and he is the CEO of Guestio. And, Travis, when you think about, the type of podcasters that are a good fit for Guestio, what does that look like?
I mean, if you have an interview podcast, is really what it is. I mean, if I was going to get more specifics, probably more business. We tend to have more business, entrepreneurship, educational type shows, some
Yeah.
health shows, health and wellness shows as well. We don't have as many like entertainment or society or comedy or different shows like that. But yeah, a strong presence. If you have an interview podcast, and especially if you talk about business, entrepreneurship, careers, marketing, educational things, philosophical things, in the people you want to speak to are speakers, authors, communicators, orators, business leaders, then there's plenty of options over on Guestio.
Yeah. And I know that we do have the link on the bottom. It's the ticker tape or the banner so that people can see the website. And I hope I have it right, because usually I check it, but I'm pretty sure I've got it right.
Yeah, it's coming up right around the corner. Yeah, travischappell.com is a great place to go. Yeah, because then you can go anywhere from there. So you can go like to my socials, my YouTube, my email list, or you can go to Guestio from travischappell.com as well.
Oh, that's very cool. I mean, you've got quite the system, and I just want to really applaud you for what you've accomplished. And, going from Lancaster, California, I mean, it's a great place. And, like you said, it's just outside of LA. But doing what you're doing today, I think that it's a great platform for people that want to get a podcast started, or they're doing a podcast. And you also offer workshops, I believe. Did I see that on your website?
Yeah, so we used to do a lot more of this. I do it very, very infrequently now, but we do one-on-one client days is really what the workshop thing was about. Yeah, we used to do like more master classes, webinars, online things. We just haven't done as much of that since Guestio started. We less informational than we used to be, I would say. However, keep an eye out, because we might be getting more into that info product space again in the future.
Oh, well, very good. Well, we'll have to keep an eye out. And I know in the show notes, we'll make sure that, we still have the website there. And we are streaming on multiple platforms, and we'll upload this to all the podcast apps and social links. Travis, when you think about going into, we're coming out of pretty far away from COVID, but it's still kind of there. What do you see for yourself in let's say in the next 2 years with Guestio and just the direction that you're going?
You know what? This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. We're probably going to come out with a Guestio 2.0 version in the next 3 to 6 months. That will be like a little bit of a different, I guess, tackling of the problem. And then on the back end of Guestio, we have an agency. So everything that the software does, we do done for you as well. It's obviously much pricier, but and the majority of our clients in that business are 8 figures plus clientele, but we do work with some 7 figures, and every once in a while someone who's doing like 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, just that the pricing has to match up with the offer structure and different things like that. So we have a little bit more of an intense application process, but that's over at guestio.com/concierge. If you want to get booked on more podcasts for more leads and online credibility, visibility, authority, everything that we're doing on this interview right now, then yeah, guestio.com/concierge would be the spot to go learn a little bit more about that.
That's very cool. So Guestio 2.0. I know ClickFunnels has a 2.0 too. If I have a ClickFunnels website, and I know they do 2.0 too. So
it does. Yes, theirs is much more intense. I'll say that.
Oh, well, you've got quite the machine. As far as kind of last comments that you would like to share with people, what do you think would be helpful for, we've got a lot of, we have business people, we have women, we have, all different types of nonprofits and people that watch our shows and download. What advice do you have for them, Travis, when it comes to, they think they've got the personality for a podcast? What are those things that you would recommend? Maybe 2 or 3 things that you recommend to get started.
Well, first off, I would say try to be a guest on shows before you commit to starting your own show, unless you know 100%. Like, when I started my show, I knew 100% that I wanted to do the show. So
Yeah.
even having any real experience doing anything in that world, I just knew that I would get in and figure it out. And I sucked at the beginning. Like, just know that you're going to suck at the beginning. Like, unless you come from a broadcast journalism background, or like you're used to doing this all the time, or you had a podcast in the past already. If you're starting from scratch, you're just going to suck, and that's okay. And not only is it okay, it's like barrier to entry. It's the, cost of admission. If you want to
Mm.
be good at something, you got to suck at it first. You know what I mean? So get over that. It's part of the
Oh.
process, and be cool with sucking for a while.
Mm.
But try to get some reps in as a guest if you're like on the edge. If you're not sure, starting a podcast is a way bigger commitment than being a guest on podcasts. So I would say, if you're thinking about it, you're not 100% sold on the idea, but you think it might be fun, try being a guest on a few shows first, because then you can kind of get your legs under you, see if you enjoy the format, see if you enjoy the conversations, and then if you really, really enjoy doing 5 or 6 podcast appearances, then maybe at that point you can sit down and be like, okay, let's go ahead and do the show thing. And then if you're going to do the show, you just got to make a commitment to consistent quality content output for
Mhm.
X period of time. For me, like, I would say no less than 2 years, but I would really be going like 3 to 5 years. Like, a podcast is a long-term play. Again,
It
unless you
is.
have an existing
Yeah.
audience somewhere, it's a little bit easier for, like Graham Stephan is a good example. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a
I've
finance,
heard the name. Yeah.
he's kind of a finance, quote unquote finance guru on YouTube, but he had like 4 point something million subscribers on his personal channel. And then him and his buddy started Iced Coffee Hour, which is a podcast.
Oh.
And they interview people on their show. And that's been around for probably, I guess maybe a couple years now. It's relatively new, but it's been around for a couple years now. But it already
Mhm.
has, I don't know, 700, 800,000 subscribers on YouTube or something. It's just like, yes, growing a podcast is difficult, but also if you have 4 million subscribers already on YouTube, then it might be a little bit easier to get your audience to move over to listen to your podcast. But if you're starting from scratch, it's just it's a heavy lift, and it takes a long period of time. And you're just going to commit to being consistent and putting out quality content for a long period of time. And expect first of all that you're going to suck, and expect that nobody's going to care. Expect to hear crickets when you publish episodes.
Mm.
But then, if you stay in the pocket long enough, then there's some really, really good payoffs.
Wow, that is great advice. And we heard it here on Luminary Leaders Live. I appreciate you being here, Travis. And we're going to stay connected because I really love what you're doing. And I want a lot of our audience, to check out Guestio and go back and listen to the beginning. I always tell, our subscribers and followers, always start at the beginning, because you're going to miss out on some really good information and hear about Travis's story. Travis, thank you so much for being here on Luminary Leaders Live. This was fun. I learned a lot myself, and I'm looking forward to, just staying in touch. And good luck to you and your journey, and, the path that you're on, and with your family, and just, Guestio 2.0, right? How exciting. I'm happy for you.
Thank you so much, Shelley. I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well, we'll have this episode loaded up on all the podcast apps. So stay tuned for, our next show that's coming up next week, and we will catch everyone next time. Thanks a lot, Travis.
Thank you.